Want to qualify to win a Legends Gamer or Legends Ultimate? Participate in the Summer League event and you may be able to do just that. Current Legends Ultimate owners can participate in the 10-week Summer League event starting June 5th, 2020 and ending August 9th, 2020. During that time, there'll be a series of weekend leaderboard events for select games each week. This is a battle to the end. Practice up, make your scores count, and top the charts once and for all, and have a beauty of a prize to show for your hard work. Have fun on the leaderboards, and good luck.
It's late, and it's Friday, and it's time for the Retro Buzz. Joining me, as always, we're going to get to the one guy later. Mr. Douglas Smith, youtube.com/COOLTOY. Welcome, sir.
Pleasure as always.
Listen, I don't know what's going on. Glenn got here kind of hastily. Bad things.
Came in hot.
Yeah, I'm really concerned. He's still getting things situated. I'm really concerned about his date.
I mean, that's a good thing that he came in so late, right? I mean, that means the date went well.
Well, I guess we're going to find out. But in the meantime, we've also got Mr. Daniel Haywood, who this unfortunately will be your last week, at least till the end of July, because you have baseball on Friday. I know, the tear. Oh, but wait. We have the solemn Mr. Glenn Planetomato, Planamato, Planamento. What's going on, Glenn?
Yes. Oh, well, I'm sorry I'm so late. It is all my fault that the show was late. I did have a date of sorts, and it was very emotional on a number of levels, and maybe we'll get into it later, but we are pressed for time, and it's my fault. So I don't want to go too much into the Kathleen Kennedy thing right now, but we have a very special guest that, again, I'm going to be all giddy like a schoolgirl again, because I'm talking to someone who I look up to profoundly. We have in the house tonight RJ Mical, who was very influential in the Amiga computer line, the Atari Lynx, which is actually the Epoch's Handy, or Epoch's Handy originally, and the, of course, 3DO multi-system. So RJ did a lot of work with all these. You can see they're all over the place. And if you people only knew the tragedy I had getting these out, if you guys know me at all, and you people do know me, I damaged my CoreGraph mini box and my Neo Geo mini box, bringing out my 1200 and my Lynx. So I cried for about half hour. So yesterday was not a good day, but I don't want to talk about that anymore. I do want to introduce RJ right now. RJ, thank you so much for joining us here on the Retro Buzz.
Oh my gosh, what a treat this is. Thank you for inviting me. What a treat this is for me.
Well, there's so many things I know I'm going to throw at you. I think my co-hosts are going to let me kind of run with this one today.
Yes.
But I know you initially from the Amiga. You guys started with the Amiga, correct? Could you tell us a little bit what you had done with basically the beginnings of that machine?
Yeah, I was one of the founding engineers of Amiga, and one of the people that helped invent the machine and make it what it was. I had a big part from my perspective because it meant so much in my life, and we were able to change so many other people's lives with the stuff that we did. But in fact, down there in the trenches, I was just one soldier with a great team of people that we were working with. It was astonishing accomplishment with just a handful of engineers to pull that whole thing off. It was remarkable, and I love that I was part of it, and I love that it has become so important over the years, and can't tell you how delighted I was to have had the great fortune to have been invited to, be part of that thing. God, it changed my whole life.
And it was an amazing time because I'm sure a lot of people know, because I've said it before, and of course, a million people watch the Retro Buzz, that a lot of the engineers for the Amiga were actually Atari engineers. And, the original brainchild for the machine, Mr. Miner, was an Atari engineer. He wanted to create it there. Atari wasn't on board. He set on its own. You started your own little company, the Amiga company, making the Joy board. And I do have one of the little Amiga power joysticks here. You remember these? So I got one of these too. And it's a great joystick. It's a fantastic joystick. And what I want to get to is that you guys did what you could do. You ran into a money problem. And Atari kind of came in to save the day, kind of, with a very, well, being Atari as they were, an offer you couldn't refuse. But at the last minute, Commodore came in to save the day. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, first of all, while some of the real meat of the engineering department was Atari, a lot of the hardware engineering was not Atari, and almost none, I think none of the software had Atari vintage behind us. It was, yeah, I mean, those people, Silicon, well, you know, it's various people around Silicon Valley. And, but anyway, I don't think too much of it was Atari, but it was heavily Atari influenced because, like you said, Jay Miner, who is, you know, you happily call the father of the Amiga. He was at Atari and wanted it to happen with Atari, but by time Atari was trying to buy the Amiga, it was no longer Jay Miner's Atari. It was this new thing that was being run by this family that had been kicked out of Commodore, and now we're trying to use Atari to sink Commodore as sort of a, you know, anger vengeance thing sort of thing. And so they were trying to buy the Amiga not to follow the mission, the dream that we had with the machine, but instead just use it as a weapon to try to hurt Commodore. And they almost succeeded because they gave us a check for a big pile of money, and we only had a month to try to figure something else out. And then who else was going to come up with anything? Atari was at that point the only suitor, and we almost ran out of time. And at the very last minute, when we almost ran out of time and had to sell it to Atari, Commodore learned about the whole deal, and Commodore stood up and found out what Atari was offering us. And the guys at Commodore said, "Oh, well, we could do a whole lot better than that for you. You know, if you want, we could like fill your coffers with that." And they did. I mean, they were like they ended up coming in more than 4 times as much what Atari had been offering. And it was like this miracle because, one, we didn't have to sell it to those guys who clearly, you know, we came to understand over the course of the negotiations that they didn't want us. They didn't want the team. They didn't want the group of people that had made that thing come into existence. All they wanted was the hardware. They wanted the rights to the hardware, and they were going to put their own people on it and make a thing happen. Later on, when those same people bought the Lynx from Epyx, the name of the company is Epyx, EPYX. And we, as you said, we called it Handy. Handy was our internal code name for that project. And you know, likewise, when they bought it, they didn't want it for the engineering staff. They didn't want it for the tools that we had developed. They were just trying to buy the hardware and do their own thing with it. That was to their great loss, because when we did the Lynx, we had an awesome development environment. We had created the most amazing development environment, but when Atari bought it, they didn't want, because we had done it all on the Amiga. The original Lynx development environment was all on the Amiga, and Atari wasn't.
Yeah, Atari wasn't. They weren't happy about that, were they?
They weren't happy about that at all.
You know, to develop for this little machine, for this little Lynx, Atari had to buy the competitor's Commodore Amiga to write code for this little guy. So that must have really burned them.
It was so bad. And it's even worse. And I have to admit, there's a person out there whose name I'm not going to say, but who we did a thing to, and we didn't like it because we liked him. Dave Needle and I both liked him a lot, and I still like him a lot. But there was Atari drove Epyx out of business. Dave and I quit. We told them, you know, don't make a deal with Atari. They're going to drive you out of business. That's what they do. They're going to find a way to drive you out of business. And Epyx said, "Oh, you don't have to worry about it. We're big and strong, and we got great lawyers." And so then Atari drove them out of business. which we said they would. And after Epix went out of business, they had a business closing sale where they had all the stuff that they were selling. And Dave Needle and Dave Morse and I were already planning on doing this next company, to go off and or maybe it wasn't, the company wasn't defined yet. Maybe we were still just thinking about it. I don't remember what the timing was, but Epix had an awesome copier, and we wanted the copier. And so we went to the auction, to this Epix auction. I don't know if you guys know the story. You might not know the story. So we went to this Epix auction. and we're wandering around the auction, and they've got, all the Epix stuff, chairs and desks and stuff. And they've got this copier, which we want to get. And they've got piles and piles of Amiga 2000s, the development environment that we had put together for the Amiga. And they were, auctioning all that stuff off as well. And we wanted that copier. We didn't need the computers. We wanted the copier. So Dave Needle and I can't believe it. This is so naughty. Dave Needle and I walked around that auction. And every time we heard anyone talk about the copier, or if they walked up and looked at the copier, Dave and I would also walk up and look at the copier, and we'd start laughing with each other about how bad the thing was and how this copier never worked for a day. It was always broken.
Downplay it so the bidders didn't want anything to do with it. Well played. Good strategy.
But then the horrible story is that when the Amigas came up for sale, we knew that the only person really that wanted the Amigas was going to be this friend of ours from Atari, whose job it was to buy Amigas from the auction because, the Atari figured they'd be able to get them for a price. And we knew this. Dave and I knew this. So Dave and I sat there and bid up the price of the Amigas, one after another.
Padding those numbers.
Tony Schiffballer says that RJ owes you you owe him $1.
Why?
I don't know. Did you work with Tony, or was he in the development? He's in the chat room saying that you owe him $1.
I don't. I have interacted with Tony a lot over the years. I just don't remember what the dollar is about. But I lose bets all the time. I'm not surprised I owe Tony $1.
It's all his fault.
So after the stuff with the Amiga and the Lynx,
wait,
how did you?
Wait, sorry.
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
right, sure.
Wait. Somebody asked Tony, what do I owe him $1 for? Anyway, please go ahead, Glenn.
Oh, sure. So with the Amiga and of course the Lynx, how did you and Dave, and we lost Dave a few years ago. He was a very nice guy. How did you guys get involved with the 3DO project?
So when we did the Amiga, it was Dave Needle was one of the important people on the hardware side. I was one of the important people on the software side, and the entire effort was led up by a fellow named Dave Morse, who was our great fearless leader, had come from Tonka, and he was a great business person, taught me a lot of what I know about business and about managing money and being independent and stuff. Dave Morse was awesome. And Dave Morse, Dave Needle, and I made up a triumvirate. We had the software side, the hardware side, and the business side. And the three of us knew enough about one another's operations that we could interact, we could help, we could discuss, we could make decisions together as a group and really understand, all three of us, what was going on with the other parts. But then once it was decided, each one of us independently could go off and execute and make it happen. And the three of us, it was a powerhouse that was beyond dreaming such a good thing could happen in my life, that I had years and years working with Dave Morse and Dave Needle. And we did originally the Amiga together, and then we got together and did the Lynx together, And then we got together and did the 3DO together, the three of us.
Fantastic team.
Just fantastic.
Now, what would be your, I guess, favorite memory from that era? Did you enjoy more working on the Amiga, the Lynx, the 3DO, or can I not make that kind of comparison because to you they were all these little babies of yours?
Oh, they're all babies of mine, but just like my own children, I happily will tell you which one is my favorite if you really want. But the 3DO was the best in that we were the most mature. We really understood what we were trying to do and how to do it. Especially Dave Morris was Dave Morris. He was just smart. But Dave Needle and I started out kind of dumb and had to grow into our britches. We had to grow into our shoes. And we did finally, but by the 3DO, we really had it together and created the most mature product that the three of us did create together. But it was also the most clinical. The Lynx was my second favorite because it was so wild-haired and just amazing, astonishing that we would just throw a thing like that together and just go make it happen. The Lynx was a nutty thing. The Amiga was my favorite because all of these were wild and wonderful, but the Amiga finally was the one that meant the most to me emotionally. The Amiga was I like to say we were on a mission. I at least was on a mission, and many of my fellow Amigans shared the same thing that we were trying to do, where we weren't we weren't making a toy, we weren't just making a computer. We were trying to change the world, to make the world a better place, a place that was more productive and where people could be more powerful and have tools and graphics and games in their own homes that were big and powerful and enjoyable and for we were aimed the Amiga at the common man. We wanted to make a machine that anyone could use, that anyone could afford, and that anyone could really understand and have a great time with. That was our goal from the beginning. And it's one of the greatest blessings of my whole life that we were successful, that with the Amiga computer we were able to create a machine that touched the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people profoundly in this world. And that's what we wanted. That's all we ever hoped for in the beginning. All we ever hoped for is that we could make your life better. And I'm on this show now. And part of why this show exists is because the Amiga existed and it kicked us in the butt and moved us in the right direction and stuff like that. And
that's something that my co-host, I keep bringing this up to my co-host, that people don't realize that multimedia that we talk about today, that Apple always taunted about multimedia and how Apple was going to change the world. People don't realize that graphic capabilities, sound capabilities, multitasking capabilities, all those things originated with the Amiga. It didn't really exist before this machine came on the market. You weren't doing preemptive multitasking. You weren't having millions of or thousands of colors on the screen. These are all things that you guys forced the industry to see at a great price point. And that's something that the Amiga community today gets so fanatical for a good reason, because all these other companies, the IBM PC, the Mac, all touting all these capabilities, but it all came from what you guys designed here back in '85 with this little machine and the custom chips that are in here. So tell me a little bit more about that, how you feel that you guys did create all this stuff, but the industry doesn't really even recognize the advances you guys did back in that time frame.
Okay, I've got this joke that I'm going to publish someday that has a little detail of a piece of an engineered product. And it's a photograph of this little detail. And the detail is there's a switch, a little switch that has, it's a 3-position switch. It can switch to one of 3 little positions. And the 3 positions are labeled 16, 33, and 45. And my joke with that is that 100 years from now, no one's going to know what those numbers mean. No one's going to remember what any of those numbers mean and what that little switch is for. You and I might remember. You might not remember anymore. But 33 and a third, to be more accurate. But it's all going to advance. It's all going to move forward. We're not going to remember. 100 years from now, people won't even be able to imagine technology that wasn't multitasking, that wasn't, fully integrated and all of that stuff. And while it irks me a wee little bit that the Amiga in the popular culture may not have established a place for itself, the people that really know, the people that really care, know about stuff like, where the Amiga fits in, where the original inventor of the mouse fits in, what Jay Miner did before, during, and after Amiga. It'll be written down, and that's okay for me, because I have to tell you the truth. I'm lucky that I'm so lucky. I was so lucky to have found myself over and over again in the presence of engineering efforts that I could be part of, and I can tell a good story, and so I did the speaker circuit for a while and stuff like that. I'm blessed in that way to have had a chance to work on stuff like this, but anyone can finally do this stuff. You don't really have to have been a super genius. You just have to have the right stuff at the right moment, and you get to become the part of the history that gets written down. We had the right group of people to do the Amiga, but the Amiga finally didn't have the right marketing and sales department to actually make it happen. I think they had the right sales department. I just don't think they had the right marketing.
Definitely the marketing was a shortcoming.
But it regardless, it kicked the rest of the industry in the butt, and the rest of the industry had to respond. You couldn't continue to have fake file systems when the Amiga had a real file system. You couldn't continue to have fake multitasking where when the printer hung, your whole computer would hang. When the Amiga didn't have that, when the Amiga had real multitasking where your computer wouldn't hang because the printer hung, unless you were running Workbench 1.0 and everything when everything hung. What a disaster.
We got a super chat in the YouTube from Zohar, and he just said super chat for his awesome laugh. So RJ, your laugh is infectious and everyone's loving your story. So thank you.
Now, another thing I want to mention here, RJ, is when you had the Amiga team, the Lynx team, the 3DO team, these are not large teams like you have today, right? Were semi-intimate, small teams working on the machines, right?
Well, yes. The answer is yes. The Amiga was tiny. I think by time Commodore bought us, the software team had only grown to 10, and we were much smaller than that for the most part. And that included QA engineer and documentation, so it was a small engineering team. And the hardware guys likewise were small. And when we did the Lynx was bare bones. The point of the Lynx was not to create some big fancy console, but to create a dirt cheap little machine. That was finally, that's finally the thing that really sunk the Lynx. This is part of the story that doesn't get told enough. The Lynx that we had designed, the thing that we were going to bring out at Epix, would have been a killer machine, would have swept the industry, because we were going to be able to launch it at a retail of $99, and we were going to have an incredible library of game software available for launch. And the reason we were going to be able to do this was because Dave Needle and this guy Rick Rice, who was just this awesome, we called him Rick Rice, the king of the Far East, we used to call him, because he was our equipment and parts acquisition person. He was our Asia person. He was amazing, Rick Rice. And he and Dave were running the entire hardware operation, and I was doing all of the software. And gosh, I'm reflecting for a second on Rick Rice. I wonder whatever happened to him. But oh shoot, I lost my place. What was I saying?
Oh, we're talking about the $99 Lynx and how it was going to change the industry.
Oh yeah, that's right, $99. Because we had someone like Rick Rice on the stick for us to get the price down, and Rick Rice had his relationship with the Far East, and Dave Needle had his relationship with all of the vendors and all of the hardware designers and me. Because of the Amiga, Dave and I both had superb relationships with the software developers throughout the industry, because the from EA to the small little mom and pop shops that developed software for the Amiga, it was, as it was a heartfelt thing. People did it because they believed in the Amiga. And so it was real easy for me to have this relationship with them where they were enthused, they were behind it, we were behind it, we were all going to do it together. Dave had the hardware, the vendors, I had the software. It was going to be like this big success. And part of what we knew was going to happen when Atari bought it was the people that were running Atari had this horrible reputation with the software developers because they didn't pay them, they screwed them, they did all this evil stuff to them. And it was different from the relationship that we had. And then it turned out likewise, the hardware people in Asia had been screwed enough by these guys that they weren't going to step up and have that happen to them again. So what was $99 turned into $129. And what was 24 titles at launch turned into 3 internally developed titles at launch and stuff like that. It was pathetic. The whole thing was pathetic, and the Lynx died because of that, because it was too expensive. And even though it was superior and it had color and all the stuff that made it wonderful, the red eye, because it had all that wonderful capability, it should have won. That machine should have won.
Right. The Lynx only came to market about 6 weeks after the Game Boy. The Game Boy launched at about $80, $79. And when I got my launch Lynx, I paid $189. It came at California Games. And from the hardware specs, I mean, there's no comparison at all. I mean, it's like comparing a Model T to a Ferrari. So are you saying that the Lynx you would have had for $99 if Epic still had it, it was the same basic hardware? There was no real difference. It was that same design, but just when Atari got it, they had basically cheesed off so many people in the industry, they weren't taking a chance and it ended up costing more because of that? Or was the hardware actually a little more simplistic than it turned out to be?
The first one that you said, if we were done and we could, now, okay, there's two things. One, finally, it would have been a $99 machine. We would have sold it for $99 from the beginning and taken a little bit of a loss on the first 10,000 units or something like that. I mean, honestly speaking, there's production ramp up and stuff like that. The first units we would have paid extra for it. But yes, we would have launched it for $99, and you probably know, your viewers might know, still to this day, there's a super sensitivity in the U.S. market to that 2-digit versus 3-digit number. If it's 99.99 versus $100, if it's 99 versus 100, that's all you need.
Yep.
That's what my date did to me tonight, actually.
And you said you paid $189 for yours?
Yeah, see, I could have got it for $99.99, but ended up charging me way more than that. But what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? So, I mean, that is a shame because the thing with the Atari Lynx, again, it was very advanced. You had 8-person multiplayer. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously you're the designer. Originally, didn't the Handy have the ability to use just one cartridge and it would download the software over the Comlinks cable? And then Atari changed it to where you had to actually buy a cartridge for every Lynx. Is that a true rumor, or was that not true?
So yes, it's true. We had designed a system that would allow you to buy a game once and give a grunt copy, not a copy that would run the whole game, but a copy that would be enough to communicate with the master copy and allow you to play games. So we could be, in a multiplayer game and you just need one person to do it. We play an online game right now, a small plug for Jackbox. Those guys are so awesome. And it's that same model where all you need is one person to buy the game and that person can share it with others. It's just a wonderful model. And we had we didn't build it in. We just had designed it so it could work that way. But Atari rejected him.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. Why sell one game when you can force them to buy 8?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Although, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I have no problem with the company making money, and I don't have any problem with a corporation doing stuff that'll maximize its profits and stuff like that. It's just, there's a difference between trying to make money and being cutthroat. And I think there's plenty of everything to go around and that you can do it with goodwill and make it happen for everyone rather than, slashing tires out in the parking lot.
Now, speaking of slashing tires, was the Lynx always using cartridges? I also heard a rumor that it used almost like a cassette. Was it always cartridge based?
Yes, it was always cartridge based, except we had other mechanisms that we had built for development that never actually, I don't think, made into actual developers' hands. I think it was just for our internal use because we didn't have, the mag tape thing right at first. And so we used other mechanisms, serial ports, and I don't think we ever did cassette tape, but we did other tricks to fake the system into believing, it was running like it should. But I don't think any of that ever got into the hands of the software developers outside of our initial group. Our initial group included Dave and his team putting together the hardware. I did a runtime library for the Lynx, and I had a team that did tools. And then in addition to that, we developed 6 games that would be available for the launch. And they were 6 of some of the most awesome games that were available for the Lynx, including one of my favorites of all time, this game called Gates of Zendokon.
Oh, yeah. That was the first game I bought. Gates of Zendokon.
It's one of my favorites because it's got my face in it. You know about that?
Yeah, yes, but if my face was in it, they'd return it. So it's better your face than mine.
RJ, we've got a question from the YouTube chat. It says, can you ask RJ about his educational background? Seems like they were doing a lot of cutting edge stuff at the time.
Ah, cool. So I got a degree in computer science from the University of Illinois. And my degree was, it would have been 79. And it was both not only a real creative, inventive time for the, for the computer industry. The Apple was about to be launched. The mouse was being invented. But even more than that, a whole bunch of other stuff was being invented right there at the University of Illinois. There was the video graphics department was at that time, while I was studying there, they were inventing this new technology that would take a live video feed. Now get this, it's game changing, it's remarkable. Would take a live video feed and allow you to create a graphic and overlay the live video feed with this graphic that you created that the live video feed would show through. A thing like a banner at the bottom that said RJ Mical, something like that. They were inventing it.
We don't know nothing about that. We don't know about superimposing graphics on video or doing any of that stuff. We don't know nothing about that.
Can you imagine it? I got to
witchcraft you speak.
Nope.
So it was truly a cool time. I played one of the original flight simulators that, when I played it, was not a 3D flight simulator that showed planes, but what it was a top-down radar view of an airspace with little symbols to show where the various airplanes were. And it was remarkable because it was updating live. It was, like Pong, where Pong was updating live and the boop, 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 boop. But this was airplanes. Little, symbols showing the different airplanes. And
I don't know if I want to be an airplane that's getting boop, boop, boop. I don't want to be in that plane.
I was going to say, he got you all excited by doing, he mentioned Pong, so
he did.
That was it.
He did.
That was the end of it.
That got me going.
Yeah. So did you play a Pong? A hardware one, or do you remember the first Pong?
Glenn probably owns like 50 versions of Pong.
Yes, I do. I'm not shy to say that I have the original 1972 Magnavox Odyssey, and I played it when it was released. I'm not afraid to say that. And I have the Atari Pong's Warlords, some of my favorite games. So yes, these young guys, you don't realize what they missed out on, RJ. But I was there. You designed it, maybe, but I enjoyed playing it.
Hey, the oldest game I played when I was in school was the little turtle that you had on the computer when you were in computer class, and the turtle went around the screen, whatever it was called.
Logo. See?
So,
we both know. No, Jamie, you win. We won again.
We looked forward. Doug, did you play that in school? I mean, we looked forward to that.
I missed that.
No, he played Turtles. He was Turtles, Ninja
Turtles. Yeah, he played the Ninja Turtles, not this Turtles.
What?
And Daniel is gone, right?
Nope, Daniel's
he's around here somewhere.
He's still here. He's listening because he's like, I know Fortnite.
Daniel, do you know what logo is?
Do you know what logo is? No.
No.
Not
okay.
Lego
Never
logo.
played it.
It's not a game. It's a kind of a programming language where you learn how to drive a turtle around, and it draws lines on the screen. And it was kind of like an intro language for a lot of people for a while.
Correct. The Text Instruments TI logo was very prevalent in the schools. And I was a little old for that, but I do remember other people using it. But RJ, I have another question for you. So you obviously have the Amiga, the Lynx, and the 3DO. Out of each one of those, what's one feature you guys wish you had incorporated at launch? What is something the Lynx should have had that you wanted to have, the Amiga, or the 3DO? What is something you wish they had gotten at launch?
Okay. What an awesome question. F and A. I don't know that anyone has asked me such a question before. This is awesome. Okay. The answer is obvious for all of them for me. The first one for the Amiga. Although more money would have been wonderful, so we could have taken longer before we first released it. If we had like an extra 6 months, the first released machine would have been so much better. But that aside, the thing that really killed the Amiga finally was the Amiga was so early that we did memory management in software, but we didn't have a hardware backup.
Right, no
memory
MMU.
Software only, and if I could add one thing to the Amiga, it would be memory management hardware.
Nice.
If I could add one thing to the Lynx, other than not selling it to Atari, I would add true multi-machine communication, true red-eye as an infrared communication pod as we had envisioned it, not the wire that we ended up with. The wire was okay, but not as cool as it would have been if you had a little pod you strapped onto your machine. And we had two models. One, a pod that you strapped onto your machine, but we were always worried because if you took a pod and strapped it onto your machine, that you would end up blocking it. If you held your machine down here, you'd block the pod. So we had a second version of it, which was the pod plus a wire, so you could drape it over the top of your leg and hang it out. And I don't know which one would have ended up happening more, the pod or the pod with the wire. I don't know, but if I could have added one thing for real to the Lynx, it would have been an infrared communication pod. And I mean, 3DO, I gotta stick with the price. If I could change one thing about the 3DO, I would have begged the management team of 3DO when it was launched to reconsider that price, because the 3DO was by far and away the superior machine, and as was the Lynx, as was the Amiga, and should have done better.
And but that 3DO though, but the 3DO was manufactured on a hardware side, and software was done independently of that. 3DO company sold the chips, correct? And then other manufacturers had to make the hardware. So it was kind of hard for them to dictate pricing on that, right?
Okay. Yes, you are so right. And so I'll change my answer, and I will say that I wish I had talked 3DO management into going with a smaller RAM footprint. If we had gone with the smaller RAM footprint, the machine would have cost significantly less. Hardware manufacturers would have sold it for less, and with a smaller retail, and it would have sold more. If they had even knocked 100 off the price, it would have been awesome. If they could have knocked 2 off of the price, it would have been huge. So yeah, I would have lived with a machine with less RAM, and and have smaller, less cool games than like the Amiga did. In the beginning, the Amiga was bare bones with RAM, but everyone wanted the better experience, so they went out and bought a RAM expansion.
Right, but with that being said, the Amiga 1000 came with 128 meg of RAM, correct? And it still had preemptive multitasking. Try doing that with a PC or a Mac.
128K of RAM.
128K. Sorry, even I was wrong. And you still had preemptive multitasking. 128K. You're right. I'm killing them. I'm killing them.
Yeah.
So think about that, people. Think about that. I was even wrong. 128K of RAM on a computer, and it was still able to preemptive multitask.
You would buy a fancy 0.5 megabyte RAM expansion pack for the Amiga. 0.5
12K,
megabyte.
that's right. Yep. That's how long ago it is. See, even if you forget, people talk about terabytes now and gigabytes. We were talking K back then. It's a huge difference.
Cell phones are more powerful.
With a single floppy disk of information, that was enough to tear down the world's infrastructure. It was a single little floppy disk, and we're taking selfies that have more data compiled on their image than the entire processing power of these systems back then entirely.
My God, so amazing, isn't it? What a different day it was. And today's programmers have no clue. They have no idea what those days were like when you had to pinch pennies like that. Where every byte of storage used to matter. One of the stories I love to tell was when one of the original games that we did for the original Lynx was a game called California Games. And we came in so close to RAM budget, but we were like some 68 bytes over budget with the RAM, with the storage on the cartridge, and we had to find 68 bytes from somewhere, and the graphics engine had a pointer that it was using for the texture for the grass in this hacky sack game where you would kick a hacky sack ball back and forth. And there was this one texture that the artists had created for the grass. And we took that texture out of the game and pointed the graphics engine at our code, pointed it directly into the middle of the code that we had written for the game, because the code kind of looked like grass. It was close enough. And we saved 68 bytes by trimming that, but by having the code show up as the grass texture in the hacky sack game. This is,
that's very
MacGyver.
Yar's revenge. That's very Yar's revenge of you, because all the side work on Yar's revenge is the game code.
I didn't know that. Really?
Yes, Howard Warshaw, when he wrote Yar's Revenge, had the same problem, had memory constraints. So that multicolored, staticky colors coming down half that screen is him just displaying the game code.
Oh my!
So you did the exact same thing there.
Wait,
Wait,
Howard! Howard, what am I
teach you
doing?
something? Did I just educate RJ Mical on something?
Wow,
Well
the
done.
teacher, the student teaches the teacher.
No, the
Yeah.
student schooled the teacher.
Giving
The
Glenn the
student
business.
becomes the master.
There you go.
You just
Now,
got
there's
schooled.
definitely one other thing I want to ask, but actually it didn't come from me. It was actually something Doug had said before, but I don't know if Doug remembers. Doug had asked a question, and I said this with all respect. I mean, with all due respect. The Amiga, the Lynx, and the 3DO were, by far, without question, the most
Superior.
powerful machines of their era. By far. The Amiga had a good 8 to 10 year lead on everyone else. The Lynx had at least a 5-year lead on everyone else. The 3DO had a 2 to 3, maybe 4-year lead on everyone else. How do you feel that you made all these incredible machines, these incredible architectures, these very advanced machines, and yet none of them, they're beloved. Don't get me wrong, all of them are beloved by the people who have them, but they weren't that one that stuck. They weren't the PlayStation 1. They weren't the Xbox One. They weren't the Atari 2600. How did that affect you and the team with that? And I mean that with all respect, because I love these machines. I have huge respect for you. But how does it feel? I mean, look at me. I have my YouTube channel. I'm on 35 years. I have 3 subscribers. So I kind of feel it from that point. But how does it feel?
Well, wait
doing that
a
kind of work?
second.
It's a labor of love.
Wait a second. Before he answers that, let him think about that for a second. We have a special call-in person right now that would like to say something to RJ. Caller, you need to mute the stream if you can.
So I kind of feel it from that point.
So,
But how does it feel? Well,
Hold on.
wait a second. I sound really cool on the.
yeah, you sound really cool, but we've got the CEO of Arcade One Up who'd like to say a few things to you, Mr. RJ. Go ahead, Scott.
RJ, how you doing, buddy?
Scott, who?
You don't know me. I'm just a fan.
He's just a fan.
Hello, Scott.
This is Scott
you
Scott
hear me?
Baccarat. He's the CEO of Tastemakers. He makes the Arcade One Up arcade machines.
Hello, Scott.
So we make a lot of those machines that you were involved with, but we do them for home use. Can you hear me?
Yep, he can hear you. Yep.
And I'm sitting here listening to this podcast, this conversation you're having, and actually it's great because I'm learning a lot that I had no idea about the history. I think you probably know guys like Joe Camico, who probably worked with you on some of the Defender stuff.
Yep.
And
He
just those machines were just so incredible. And I just wanted to call and kind of just show some respect and say thank you, because without you guys kind of laying the groundwork initially, we would have never had the opportunity to do what we're doing today. And I'm going to tell you personally, just no business or anything else, I spent a lot of days, a lot of hours, and a lot of time playing Defender, Pong, the rest of them. And it was a great motivation for what we're doing today. So I just want to say thank you.
You play Pong now today? You play Defender today?
I couldn't play Defender today if my life depended upon it. But I was pretty good back in the day. I still do play
Really?
Pong. Yeah.
I never got good at Defender
truth be-
or Stargate. You had to be like some sort of
Defender was
octopus
good.
to play the game well.
Yeah, you had to have that crazy finger combination, right? You know, the guys
Well,
know
being
to
a
this
teenage
day.
boy in that era, you had to be an octopus with the dates. So that gave you some extra dexterity in the game of Pong.
But you know what, Scott? You could probably still beat Glenn.
I could
I
try.
don't know. Scott, I will come down to your office. I'll bring my Atari Pong console. We'll go head to head in some Pong.
Done.
One.
There we
RJ,
go.
where are you? RJ, where are you based out of?
I'm in California in the United States, and I have been sheltering at home for more than 3 months. And one of the cool side effects of it is that we have now applied to the federal government for statehood for this beard. This baby is impressive, don't you?
You know, I have one, but mine's not clearly as long as yours. But yours looks more distinguished than mine.
Distinguished.
One.
Uh-oh, Glenn, he wants to
Anyway,
say
I just wanted to call in and thank you very much. Be safe.
We appreciate it, Scott. Appreciate you calling in.
Yeah,
And
thank you for calling, buddy.
All right, guys, take it easy. Thanks a lot, guys.
Take care.
Hi,
take
Scott.
care.
Thank you.
RJ, that's basically you just spoke to the president of the gaming arcade industry right there. So we pay homage to Scott.
Well, that's why normally we don't
Mical.
take live phone calls during the show, but I felt like this is one that we make an exception. He really wanted to, pay homage to RJ, and I was like, yeah, call in, man.
One.
We'll get him on there.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. What a treat.
Well, there's definitely a connection too, because like RJ, a lot of what you've developed, the goal it sounded like, and the basis for a lot of the projects you worked on was getting these games and these computers and things like that to as many people as possible, and that's the similar kind of thing that Scott's doing with Arcade 1-Up. He's trying to revitalize the arcade industry and make it accessible to people where previously we all just grew up as kids saying, "Oh man, golly gee whiz, I wish one day I could own an arcade machine in my own house now." And Scott's company is kind of making that not only available, but it's, captivating people's attention by allowing them to not only buy an arcade, but many arcades and have those experiences that they had growing up at their homes. So it's
no fog required.
And
no fog required.
And I can honestly say, like my son is a big fan of Centipede. Like I think he got to level 17 on the Arcade 1-Up Centipede machine over there. So, I mean, for a 7-year-old in this day and age, right, to play Centipede is.
I also want to say something.
Go ahead.
Glenn.
Say something to Glenn. He wants to say something to you, Glenn.
We all know you're bad at Pong. You don't have to hide it.
Not Pong, baby.
Not Pong.
I said bad.
Pong's my boy.
He could probably
my
play
boy.
Pong. All right, we'll have to do that on the Legends sometime. You'll have to play Daniel if we can get. I'm sure there's Pong on there. We could play it and play it over.
There is.
Or,
And then we'll film it.
There is.
Or
there is.
There is.
Or we can just battle on Centipede.
We can do that too. Although
Centipede
that.
calling you out. All right.
He is.
All right.
That's
But-
like
but-
my favorite game ever.
His favorite game.
No
yeah.
cheating now. Don't be when I'm off camera. Your father comes in and plays a little bit. It's got to be camera on you the whole time.
No, literally, I'm.
He beats me. I am not good at Centipede. He beats me. So
And I'm a 7-year-old that is in 2020. Ooh,
I already
witchcraft.
told RJ I already told RJ the truth. You're 42. You're a midget. So RJ knows the truth.
well, either way,
Nope.
RJ. I mean, I'm like Doug, just kind of sitting here listening to, because this is kind of Glenn's forte, because Glenn is like the human dictionary when it comes to this stuff. So it was just really interesting to hear these stories, and If you've got a few minutes, we're gonna wrap up the show, and then we'll do like a.
Don't wrap it up just yet. Don't wrap it, we have that one question he has to answer.
Yeah,
still.
we're gonna get that
Ah,
question
yeah.
answered, but then after that,
I still got that last question, but I
Yep.
also could tell you a quick Pong story. You want to hear a quick Pong story?
yeah,
Absolutely.
we do. So we want to tell everybody too. You guys can call in. We'll put up the phone number after we wrap up the show. We'll keep them around 15 minutes, and then if you're able to, and they can call and ask you some questions, and maybe you've got some answers for that. So back to Glenn's question. Glenn, you might have to refresh his memory a little bit because I kind of forget what you asked
Sure.
him.
I know,
Sure.
me too.
I'm gonna put it. The disclaimer was all respect. That was the first thing, but making the advanced Amiga, 3DO, and the Lynx, which were by far the most powerful machines of their times, how did it feel that they never actually took the market by storm like they really should have, but they just didn't? How did that affect you guys?
Yeah. So it's like it's a two-part answer for me. The first part is, I personally won. I have had an astonishing life where I have been able to stand in the company of brilliant people, and I point to Dave Morris and Dave Needle as the two most powerful companions I've had over all of these years. But that's just to name two. There's countless amazing, wonderful people that I've had a chance to work with over the years. Happily, the vast majority of them I'm still friends with to this day, and will hang around with and go to dinner parties or Burning Man together or whatever. And so I personally won so big time in life. Everything I've done was building up of the stuff I did before Scott came on and talked about arcade. I started in arcade before Amiga. I got into Amiga because of the work that I had done in arcade games in Chicago and with Defender and Stargate and Joust and Robotron and all of those wonderful games back then. And Sinistar was my game, and one of them. And
Hunger. I hunger.
Beware, coward. But so me personally, opposite of I got no complaints. Me, I am who I am today. I get invited onto an amazing show like this to talk about my story a little bit and to share with other people because I was so lucky, because I was able to create such good stuff. And yes, the machines never became 100 million billion sellers or any like Nintendo and some of the other ones did, but I don't care. We were able to create such cool stuff, and I got invited to create more cool stuff, and then I got invited to create more cool stuff. I mean, me personally, it's just been an amazing life. But the other side of it, the second part of the answer, is the more meaningful stuff. We created the Amiga, and we always intended it for it to be a machine that would help other people realize more, become bigger and greater versions of themselves than they might have otherwise. And we succeeded a lot. We have heard so many wonderful testimonials from people whose lives were changed, whose lives were enriched, who found new avenues for expression, new careers to have and stuff like that. And for me, I mean, that's what we did it for. And I could not possibly ask for more than to have people be happier in their lives because of the stuff that we did, and that's why we did it.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you very much for it. I speak mostly for myself, but as you know, the community is big. My childhood, my teenhood, okay, I was old, my adulthood was really focused on these machines, and my love for them is huge. I really want to thank you for such great memories and current still memories I'm having with the machines now. RJ, thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you very much for inviting me to do this. This has been just a real treat for me. This stuff makes me feel so good. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you being on here, and
Pleasure.
we'll get in the post show. We want you to tell that Pong story when we get in the post show here. But RJ, again, if anybody wants to get in contact with you, they can head over to your website, mical.org, mical.org. For those listening on the audio version only, you guys can check out his website there. But again, thank you so much for joining us.
And I publish a weekly puzzle. If anyone wants to join my puzzle list, please send me an email, rj@mical.org. Be happy to add you to the list. Doug, Stephen, Daniel, thank you very much. This has been a real treat.
Absolutely.
And we also
It's been
want
an absolute pleasure to have you. Absolutely enjoyed the stories, and I can't thank you enough for your contributions to the gaming community, sir.
So, Doug, what do you got on deck for Sunday?
So Sunday, it's going to be a little hidden gems type of thing. So the At Games Legends Ultimate Arcade Cabinet has, over 350 built-in games, and that can be a little daunting for people that are just trying to find some cool games to play. So I picked hand-selected 10 games that I think people should check out that maybe are not as well known, not those big name titles that I think are still really great games that they need to check out. So it's going to kind of be a hidden gems top 10 list for them Sunday.
Awesome. Check it out. YouTube.com/COOLTOY. And my son is happy because 2 of our Ghostbuster action figures have come to this week. We got Stay Puft and the Green Ghost. Yep, Slimer. And so mine are in the package. His are out and breathing, and he can't wait for the Ghostbusters to get here. Right?
They're cool.
Doug calls them the plastic traps.
The plastic traps. Yes.
Yep, plastic
Yeah,
coffins.
from the Transformer Decepticon video.
Yeah, he watches your stuff. So this will be Daniel's last week, unfortunately, until the end of July. He is in baseball, but we'll bring him back.
On my days off, maybe I'll practice Centipede so then me and Glenn could battle.
Hey.
And Glenn's kissing his keyboard.
And of course,
This is actually my girlfriend. This is my girlfriend, Amiga.
I thought it was Atari.
no.
I'm gonna tell her. You're gonna be busted.
YouTube.com/GPlanamento. Not Planet Tomato, but Planamento. And you can see him kissing his Amiga, his Lynx, his Ataris, all that good stuff. Make sure you go check them out. Check out all the official groups, Arcade 1UP, At Games, and all the other great groups that Glenn patrols over there on Facebook. And
Patrols.
Whatever.
guys, you can find me. Just go to thetechbuzz.net. Everything's there. We really appreciate you guys hanging in with this late night show because of Glenn's date. Glenn, we might be making some changes for next week, so we'll leave that as a surprise for you guys next Friday. We'll return at 6 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you guys subscribe to the podcast, audio and video, and we'll be back next week. For those of you sticking around for post-show, get your phones ready, call in, ask RJ some things. We're going to stick around for a little bit. And those of you that got to go, I understand. We'll see you next week here on The Retro Buzz.